a story that gallops from the depths of war to the heights of the Olympics. It is about the cold steel of the cavalry and the warmth of a romantic love. It is about a man with a code of honor from the knights of chivalry. It is about a spiritual bond with a magnificent animal. In his 80s, Colonel Michael Gutowski still starts every day with his lifelong companion, the horse.
Yeah, I live all my life with horses. Yeah, I was put on a horse when I was not 1 year old. Since I was about 2, I was riding the pony by myself. And I remember when during the First World War, the Germans came in. And one big fellow get on that pony. Of course, his legs were on the ground. And he tried, the pony wouldn't move when he tried to couldn't back him off. And suddenly, the pony, in a full speed, took off and jumped in the pond. He fell off, of course, we couldn't stay on it. He was so furious, then he reached for the pistol and wanted to shoot him. The other officer restrained him. But he was furious. I remember it like today.
The family estate farm near the German border afforded a privileged life for Michael and his brothers and sisters. But their father was a cavalry officer in the reserves who emphasized the obligations of their class. They were landed yeomanry, ready above all to defend their country. The young Gutowski went into the 17th Lancers.
I have to do my duties as an officer in the line, train my soldiers and perform all the other duties of the officer in the regiment. And only in spare time I could ride. So I remember when I was a young man, I was riding at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I rode till 6 o'clock. At 6 o'clock I had to be in the squadron. So I was quite crazy about riding.
In those days, horse shows were military affairs. The competitions were a 3-day event, a horse triathlon, and they still are in the modern sport of 3-day eventing. The first day of dressage tested obedience and precision, and it still does. The second day of cross-country tested speed, courage, and strength over huge solid obstacles and treacherous water jumps. It still does. The third day proved endurance remained for the jumping ring, and it still does.
It was a test for the rider and horse, particularly officers' mounts.
They were honed for the ultimate test, the full cavalry charge. In the 13th century, a bloody Pyrrhic victory stopped the Tartar advance. The rules were the same then.
It would be a great dishonor if some of the privates would pass the colonel going in the front. He is supposed to go first, and first one get on the enemy.
The Germans, too, were a relentless enemy from pre-Christian times in this ambush. To the days of the Teutonic Knights of the Cross, wolves in Christian clothing. Feathered standards foiled efforts by Turks and Tartars to dehorse or strangle them with lariats. These eagle wings would be the insignia of the Polish cavalry in the Normandy invasion. Every man knew, like the legendary Commander Chernetsky, that he lived or died on the strength of his horse. In an era of stealth bombers and laser-guided missiles, it's hard to realize that within modern memory, men on horseback carried the day. Gutowski himself was in this parade before the World War I cavalry hero Pilsudski in 1934. Gutowski and his fellow officers were like feudal knights. A vow to defend their country was not just words. There was every likelihood the neighbors would pick another fight. But in the 1930s, his mind wasn't on war at all. The most important event in Gutowski's life was his marriage to Zofia Zarinsky in 1934. She was raised here at Tarsim, the family chateau. She was a child of the gentry, but she was a strong child and eventually brave enough to fall in love with this imposing young officer. Soon, Sophie and Michael had 2 children, Piotr and Marek. In 1936, a childhood dream, the Olympics in Berlin. Hitler's Berlin.
Along the road leading to the Olympic Stadium, then on both sides were the flags, red and white, with the swastika in the center. And then the whole company of his personal guard, marching in black uniforms, every man 6'2" or more, and marching drilled phenomenally. So for the army men like myself, it was definitely very impressive, and I believe was impress anybody who was watching this. My horse, which called Warszawianka, which actually means a girl from Warsaw, was fantastic jumper, fantastic jumper.
Only a few months earlier, he was severely injured, breaking many bones in a bad fall. Through sheer iron discipline, he healed himself enough to ride Warszawianka in the Olympics.
Unfortunately, I was going clean to the 13th jump. And then I was instructed by my coach to slow down on that combination, and I went too slow and got stuck between and never went any further.
The Germans won, the Poles came second, but the teams were best friends.
We all were invited, I believe it was at Goering's, but Hitler was present there and we were presented to him. And in the beginning we didn't expect that Hitler would turn the way he did.
The Poles were utterly unprepared for Hitler's blitzkrieg. They knew they were outgunned. They fought impossible odds to gain time until England and France could mobilize. Gutowski is determined still to set the record straight.
You have to know that the German propaganda was trying to make fools of the Polish army. They made some film from the cavalry on that first charge. Some soldiers or some lancers coming on the tanks and armored cars with the swords and so on. And they were made out of this some, let's say, propaganda about how stupid the Poles were actually. They were considering attacking the tanks with the lances and swords. Nobody ever considered attacking tanks or armored cars with the swords. But in a frenzy actually of fighting, you can imagine then hundreds of soldiers in a full gallop with swords attacking the infantry. And then they coming against the tanks. Well, this man acted under the moment of the fighting, you know, in the excitement of fighting. So maybe some of them were trying even to get on the tanks. There were some hand grenades thrown inside. Yes, true. In 1939, there were several charges. I myself was 4 times in it. First time, we came early in the morning, and we came unexpectedly on from behind on the about 15, maybe 12 to 15 guns, German guns, trained in direction to Warsaw. We didn't know anything where we are because nobody had a map. And we charged this artillery from behind. It was actually quite stupid because there were no losses given to the Germans except scare them out.
The Germans had sliced into Poland like a knife into a cake, the point stabbing at Warsaw. They formed a bristling ring around the capital city. The Polish forces struggled to get through that ring to hold off the final assault. They came upon some unsuspecting Germans.
At least there were 2 or 3 companies of the German infantry in march, all together. And we were about 300 horses. Germans were more than 300. And we came in a full gallop right in the middle of them. Well, I never saw anything like this and panic of that kind ever in my life. They were so scared and so shocked because from behind, from middle of their forces, suddenly 300 horses galloping over them. It was so comical beside this. Then Germans were trying to escape and climb over the barbed wires. And our lancers were coming with a sword and pick them up in the bottoms, you know, and so on, and slash at them. I don't think they will kill too many, but I think a lot of them were wounded in the poor part of the body. It may sound like a brave story, but I was laughing to the point I nearly fall off the horse. It was so comical. But we galloped through, and then we coming on the open field, and we are galloping, dust like hell. 20 to 50 meters from us, the Germans are shooting like to the sitting ducks. Courage is nothing but determination to do something what you're supposed to do.
200 of their 300 horses were lost, killed, wounded, or hightailed into the bush. But beloved as they were, the horses were just more casualties of war.
I lost in this one day, from 60 men, 19 killed. Now, if you lose so many men whom you knew perfectly well, you knew like your own family, you get used to lose. And horses, well, you were sorry, but what you could do? It was destruction everywhere. You know, you become immune to the, let's say, certain emotional reactions. You were looking on the killed person whom you seconds before you talk to, and then you look like, well, he's dead. Yes, he is. That's all. You didn't think very much about it. You knew very well that he is today, tomorrow you could be you perfectly well. Honestly speaking, I never thought about it much. And I believe most of the other people were thinking the same way.
After only a few weeks of fighting, Poland was chaos. Gutowski was summoned to the front lines.
When I came there, reported to Brigadier, he said, "Gutowski, that's nice. Do you see bridges?" I said, "No, sir." "Don't you see here?" When about 300 meters, I see something. He said, "That bridge is there." I never been there in my life before. And he said, "Charge." So I asked him, "Sir, what's the situation?" "Well, don't you see what's going on?" I said, "Who's on the other side?" "The Germans, of course." And I turned back as a salute and turned back, and I'm going back to the squadron. We're just coming from the woods. So I came to them and I said, "Boys, we have to charge the bridge. 15 lancers here, 2 squadrons. Can't push the Germans out from it. Well, let's show them how we do this." 150 horses, or men rather, yelling is quite a noise, plus the noise of the galloping horses. So you can imagine how the Germans should feel when I don't blame them. They took powder. Powder doesn't mean disappear. Doesn't mean run away. You become a little bit show-off. It was sort of show-off, because I said to them, and I said, "Let's show these 15 lancers how the 17 lancers doing their job." They gave, honestly. But if you take it the other way, you know, the war, then you can come to the very funny conclusions. They say war is stupid, plain stupid. But there are some moments in which you're doing the same like in a horse show or something else, a competition, with yourself sometimes.
It was not a game for his young wife. Sophie and the children were trapped in a small village called Valavice, held by the Germans. Michael and Sophie had no idea of each other's fate or whereabouts. He was still leading his men in the struggle towards Warsaw. The cavalry basically moved on horseback and fought on foot. Charges were the exception. At night, they would muffle the horses' hooves with caps and shirts to sneak past German sentries at roads and railway tracks. On horseback, they could also penetrate unlikely terrain.
There were fish ponds and marshes, actually theoretically unpenetrable. And the German didn't expect any attack from this side. And suddenly we received the fire on no more than about 25, 30 yards from 2 machine guns. With these four soldiers, we just jumped them. And we took these bull machine guns. And I took the squadron again to attack. So we stormed again one other quarter, and suddenly I was hit in the shoulder. And I just made let's say, a roll over the head, like somebody will hit me with a hammer. It's a very funny feeling, you know, of being shot. And it was still going till about 8 o'clock in the morning, when finally the other squadrons worked themselves closer, and then we stormed them from all directions.
When the smoke cleared, they had taken Valavice.
Whom I see there, Sophie, my wife, who was 23-year-old, with our little boy, 3 years old, another baby, 6 months old. And she was actually present when we were fighting. Only she didn't know this is my squadron.
Then Sophie was told it was the 17th Lancers and their captain was fatally wounded.
That was the only information Sophie got, till I came myself in a person. You know, then it was quite an emotional thing.
Up until now, Sophie had avoided the camera, but suddenly she spoke up about one of the most haunting memories.
His father died in Katyn.
My father died in Russia. You know?
Katyn. The Russians murdered 40,000 Polish prisoners of war there, most of them officers. Michael's father was one of them. They even killed their victims' horses. The Russians had invaded from the east on September 17th. The Germans pulverized Warsaw, and Poland fell to her ancient enemies. Thousands were herded into the unspeakable death camps. Sophie and the children were put in a civilian detention camp. Gutowski smuggled food into them, then he was captured.
They arrested me. And the commanding officer who was interrogating me, I didn't know, first of all, he's a cavalry regiment. I said, I have had friends in the German army. I am ashamed of that. And they was informed in a short way that I'll be shot next day. I heard the door opening, so I crossed myself only, and I said, ready. I will go. And then door opened, and a non-commissioned officer, sergeant, standing there, tall, nice-looking fellow, and saluting like this, you know, and say, Herr Commandant, that means commanding officer, I'd like to see you.
The German commandant remembered Gutowski and Warsowianka from the Berlin Olympics, and he let his fellow horseman Gutowski go free with these words.
Fortunately, Gestapo is not completely organized here. If they put their hands on you, you don't live 24 hours. That German officer told me. And then I said, what shall I do, you think? As soon you leave this barracks, you just disappear. Change your name, never go back where you were, and disappear. That German officer told me himself. Well, I didn't follow these orders. because Sophie was still in the camp, and Chula was in the camp, and I couldn't leave him.
But by now, Sophie and the children had been forcibly taken away into the country by train.
There was one suitcase per person, and she was with 2 small children, and no place to go. Do what you like. Hundreds of kilometers from the place from where she was taken.
In his search for them, Gutowski came across a wounded German cavalry officer.
I said to him, "You are a cavalry officer, and I am Polish cavalry officer." And I told him in a short way, my family was taken somewhere. Could you find out where they moved, where they were moved? He said, "Wait a second." And where he went? To the Gestapo.
But the German cavalryman did not betray him. He came out and told Gutowski where to find his family.
The feeling of the cavalry toward even enemy cavalry was different. It was some chivalry which was coming from the medieval days, you know. And that chivalry existed even in last war against such a, let's say, hard enemies as Germans and Poles.
These men and women are the survivors, the veterans. This one was their war, and they belong to it then and now. It is clear that Colonel Gutowski, the key speaker, is a legend in his own right. This shy veteran exclaimed that even today he would die for his colonel. Gutowski remembers one young soldier who did die for him at the Battle of Walawice.
They brought him, and his head, I put it on my knee. And he was lying like this and asked me if I could inform his mother of his death. Well, I didn't know if I could survive this or not. But nevertheless, he just lost the conscience, and I saw he's dead. So I just put his head down, and then I went back to the fighting. And to my greatest surprise, in the first meeting when was unveiling of the monument, exactly 30 years after the fight, in the same place, I am, let's say, greeting all the soldiers which were still there. Some of them were in this fight, some were not. Suddenly, I'm just looking in the face of the one who died on my knee. You know, he goes already, didn't know what to say. I say, "Jesus Christ, and you're still alive. You're supposed to be dead."
Gutowski got to England to join the Polish division there. They were attached to the Canadian 2nd Army Corps. Instead of horses, the cavalry now rode tanks. Gutowski commanded a tank squadron, and they returned to Europe in the Normandy invasion. They fought from the beaches to the devastated city of Caen, then through the appalling carnage of the Falaise Gap. One of the enemy commanders was Colonel von Oppeln-Brunakowski from the German Olympic team of 36. Gutowski met him years later in Canada.
He said, "I must tell you something." Then I fought everywhere. I fought against the Germans, Russians in Russia, and I fought against the French and British and so on, and I never ever in my life was in a toughest fight than I was against the Polish cavalry. They were fighting like crazy. I never seen such a fury and such a crazy attack as they were going. They were going disregarding the fire and so on. We had a lot of ammunition, a lot of machine guns, and they were still going right in the middle of the fire. I said, "You lost about the half of your forces anyway, or more." He said, "Oh, no. I said, "About 100 were put together in one grave, and about more than 100 was taken prisoner of war. You don't think there's a big losses?" He said, that's not true. I said, listen, I counted myself. I counted them myself. I said, you were there? Yes. I said, I led that attack on you. I said, we met twice more. Do you remember 50th Goering, 1876, where 3 Polish officers tried to talk to you and you couldn't speak Polish, neither French? And he looked at me and said, my God, Oberleutnant, that's me, lieutenant, Oberleutnant Gutowski, Warszawianka, that was the name of my jumper. I said, do you ever been SS? He said, no, never. And then how happened then in the Falaise Gap, actually outside the can, you were commanding the group of tanks from the 17th German SS division, Hitlerjugends. So how happened? I was only sent out there because I didn't have the good officers. Well, I say, that's fine. That's interesting.
The Nazis were driven back, but all of Europe was devastated, and the Allies liberated Poland only to hand it to the dreaded Russians.
I felt my home. This is where I belonged, you know. And that was destroyed completely. All this life was destroyed.
Michael and Sophie Gutowski left everything behind to start a new life in Canada with their sons. He had been invited to coach the Army show jumping team, which became the national team. Today, at Toronto's Royal Winter Fair Horse Show, he can look with satisfaction at a lot of his handiwork. Generations of Canada's best riders owe a lot of their skill and success to him and the Polish Cavalry School. Former world champion Mario Delorier and his father as well are lifelong friends of their mentor Gutowski.
Here to challenge now, let's welcome back Ian Miller and Big Ben.
Ian Miller, several times world champion, lived with Sophie and Michael as a child protege long before his partnership with his famous horse, Big Ben.
He risks a lot, but that horse can do it, and he can do it.
Sir George McCarthy, President of Seabrook, Canada. Wife Jenny joined.
The Colonel seems to know just about everybody. Tom Gayford, one of the best riders he says he ever taught, became a Canadian team coach. And Jim Elder, another famous ex-student, rode in the Olympics 7 times. These are the guys from the good old days. The Elder family's home movies are an archive of the glory days. Rome, 1960, was distinguished by the glamorous owner of one of their horses, Gino Lollobrigida. They got to the Olympics in large part thanks to Gutowski. The Canadians were diamonds in the rough. Gutowski stopped the practice of rapping, hitting the horse's forelegs with a pole in warm-up to make it pick up its feet on the jump. Rome and other early Olympics were marred by tragedy. Several horses killed on the dangerous footing over treacherous jumps. On the Colonel's 83rd birthday, Jim and Marianne Elder give a small party. Former team rider Brian Herbenson and his wife Sylvia arrived first.
It wasn't really anything as far as coaching, really. Coaching has only happened, well, because of you.
Yeah, we thought dressage was a form of salad. Well, I can recall going out on a Saturday. You were teaching us what dressage was all about, getting deep in the saddle and all that stuff. And I can recall a particular Saturday where I was out and you were making us work very, very hard. And I was sitting there squeezing as hard as I could and nothing much was happening. And
Squeeze at that leg,
yeah,
right?
squeeze
at that leg.
You sat there, you stood there in the middle of the ring and you said, Brian, what's the matter with you, Brian? Your legs, they bubble like English sausages. He said, I know what were you out with Sylvia last night or what? You know?
And Tom and Martha Gayford round out the company.
Hey, Major, you remember that man there?
Yeah.
What do you say, Michael?
We'll see.
How are you doing? Good.
I'm going to ask you.
Not going to kiss you. What a wacky night, Sophie. I can kiss her.
No, they're in great shape.
Hi, Michael.
Nice to see you.
What do you say, Brian? How are you doing? Well, Tom. When he was getting mad and coaching us, he'd jump up and down, bloody thing, throw his hat down and jump on it like that. And that was Michael when he got mad at us all the time.
He hate my guts, you know. Son of a gun coming from where? From Gutowski, Poland, you know. And he's going to give him a hard time, you know.
Jimmy and I had a lot of fun.
Because I said the Canadians deserve to go to Olympics, but do not expect from them
All
miracles.
Michael's fault, all the trouble we've been in ever since, too, Jimmy.
Did what?
It's all your fault, all the trouble Jimmy and I have been in jumping since. Trying to ride those horses.
Yes.
When Michael came over in '49, we'd never sent a jumping team or an equestrian team to the Olympics. So he coached the jumping team. And in order to compete in the Olympics, we had to go in the 3-day event because we didn't have the specialized jumpers that they needed. And what you need in a 3-day event, you need a good all-around horse, like a decathlon athlete.
The first 3-day event I ever saw, and I know it was true for Jimmy and John Rumble, was in Stockholm. The closest we got to that was a 2-day event in England, and it damn near killed all of us. And then we went over to Stockholm,
Brian,
and they said, you're going to do this for 3 days.
You know, in these days, there was no Olympics in a combined event when some horse didn't break the neck or leg or something.
After the disastrous Rome Olympics, rules were changed to make eventing safer. Today's riders are working for even better safety standards for horse and rider.
Crank.
The equipment now includes protective vests and special helmets.
15 AB, 16, 17, 18, 19, 25.
But still, a rider's pretty careful to know where he's going.
27, 28, 29. Hey, an Omar.
Okay. Wait. Oh, yeah. Like, you need to be typing that.
Veterinary checks to ensure a horse is fit to continue are held between each phase, and the checks are stringent.
This is how you build your upper body strength for eventing.
Colonel Gutowski also recommends shortening the long road and track and steeplechase phase. It exhausts some horses before they even get to the cross country. This is the pre-Olympic 3-day event at Checkmate near Collingwood, Ontario. In England and Europe, where it's still called the military event, it's hugely popular, drawing up to 250,000 people at the big one at Badminton. In Canada, it is growing and growing fast. Gutowski's great gift to many of these riders is, above all, his love and understanding for the horse.
Horse and a rider have to know each other, have to trust each other. That's probably most important. You cannot make him to be afraid of you. Absolutely not. But to respect doesn't mean to be afraid, to fear. To respect is mean to listen. horse which is going cross-country should go anywhere his rider decides him to go. And in this case, I made a little bit check on him. Is he willing to go from this dropping down, let's say, sand pit, where the sand and gravel is coming from under his feet, and he is scaring. But he did quite nicely, as you notice. And a rider on a horseback have to mold himself in a horse movements. That's the first thing. Because otherwise, he will never feel the horse reactions, even intentions. But if you are properly settled on a horse, and you relax to the point that you are starting forming the part of the unit, then you can feel even in advance what the horse intends to. You should never provoke the horse to show him his power. If you provoke, you are in a fight in which very often you may lose. I do not permit the horse to misbehave, but this permission or not permitting, it doesn't mean by beating the horse or being cruel, no. But convincing the horse that he has to submit to my will, trying to be strict and same time completely kind.
His young horse, Dominant, has responded in kind.
Okay, has a bit fine.
And when I got him 3 years ago, his ear was always back. He was getting in the corner of the stall, and he was like an unhappy dog. Now he is a happy horse.
Even after all these years, Sophie still sometimes comes out to watch.
The horses are scared of this, let's say, water, which are splashing in his face. They definitely, most of the horses that are afraid of it. So we use a little bit of compromise. We getting the horse in the water and then bribe him with it. And I give him some carrot or apple in the water. So he's associating this. When he got in the water, he got something. It was pleasant.
No. I bribe the horses after they do well, not before. But if the horse do well, rewarding is 100% more important than punishing the horse if he didn't want to.
One of his prize pupils today is Peter Gray, a Canadian on Bermuda's Olympic team. Peter gives Gutowski 100% credit for getting him to his first Olympics and for giving him the confidence and sheer bravado to get through the giant course.
Brush, wall, then oxer and combination. Okay?
Okay, I'll try that.
One old age catching up with me.
You can jump a line of fences and make a turn at the far end, and he can be adjusting the fence, and we all used to joke that he had eyes in the back of his head because he could still know what you were up to even when his head was turned the other way. Through our many years of having a partnership in or a relationship as a trainer and a rider, it's also developed into a very, very good friendship, and he is someone that I would talk to as if he was my age. And it's quite an unusual relationship, and one that I certainly treasure. And he's a great friend and a very, very kind man, very thoughtful and sensitive. He's a master. It's a philosophy of life, how he deals with people as well as horses.
When I'm coming to the stable and I call Domino, he's just answering like this. Oh, yes, he's a very, very nice, pleasant horseman. No, that's okay. Okay, enough.
For luck, Peter Gray wears the green jacket, tailor-made for the colonel in 1948.
For the training division, for the winners in the training division.
For the jacket.
Yeah.
I grew up from a jacket. So Peter, you got it.
I have a very nice tailor.
And it's a lucky one for him. He's the one more classy with the jacket than without.
But tragically, Peter came to grief on soggy ground in England just before the Barcelona Olympics. His injuries were so severe it took 6 months to mend. Eventing demands courage, skill, and endurance. You have to be as tough as any cavalry horse and soldier.
And because I don't see any reason why to make a sissy out of yourself. My father told him when I was a little kid, if you fall off and hurt yourself, as long as you can get on your feet, then you get up on your horse and in a hurry. There is no other way for a man.
Nick Holmes Smith and his big gray Ruderpest won individual and team gold at the 1991 Pan Am Games. They make it look easy here at Grandview near Barrie, Ontario, over the Coffin. Nick treasures his early years with the Colonel.
And we were schooling this water jump, and I kept doing it wrong, incorrectly, and Colonel kept screaming at me what to do. Finally, I did it badly enough where the horse went to the left and I went to the right. I went straight under the water head first, and I was totally submerged in this water and sort of started swimming and sort of struggling away from this horse because I thought I might get trampled by him. And when I came up out of the water, I saw these 2 feet, because they were the Colonel's feet standing beside the water jump. And so I look up the Colonel and sort of grin at him, hoping for a little bit of sympathy because I'd just fallen off. And Colonel screamed at me and gave me hell for doing this, that, and the other, and back on the horse again. And I finally got it right. But everybody who was watching was screaming with laughter. It's quite funny, but it was one of my first memories.
When you hear screaming, I never scream. I only raise voice a little bit.
All right, you raised your voice.
And seldom. When you were in the water, you were going to hear me anyway. I changed at least in the mellow, at least on the surface. Yes, I'm still tough on myself.
When things get tough in competition, you know, and you're dead tired and your arms feel like spaghetti and you have 5 more jumps to go, you've got to be tough, and you've got to instill that sort of toughness of character in people.
Nick will be excellent man in the Polish cavalry. Honestly, we need a tough people, and he is a tough like son of a gun.
The fear you have is fear of failure more than fear of being injured. But I personally now I just ride horses that I know are clever, going to take care of me.
The natty rider's habit may seem a long way from the battlefield. But in any case, it always comes down to the horse, even in dressage. The harmony and precision, the instant responses that look so peaceful here were what your life depended on in action in the cavalry. Once you know the athletic skill involved in something like this extended trot, dressage is mesmerizing. These fans are as enchanted as any audience at the ballet.
Because art of riding is to be done invisibly. In many ways, it is sport, I mean, a physical effort. But to do something really artistically, like in a classical ballet, when you know very well, the girls have a hair usually put it flat, tie up behind the head. Ballet dancers have to be harmoniously built. And then you have to move with the same harmony, and they have to have making the impression that she is actually hardly touching the ground. And when she walks, she's more floating in the air than touching the ground. Now, well-performed dressage has a lot of these elements.
Laura Young-Black, who plays the young Sophie in this film, has known the Gutowskis for years. Her husband, Stuart, is one of the Colonel's prize pupils. He rode in the Barcelona Olympics for Canada. Stuart passes on to Laura the skills he learned from the Colonel.
So we'll just do the same thing again just before you go. When the horse is in the ring there, just go straight away, do the angle down, over the parallel, right the same way, then sharpen him up and go for a short one to the vertical, okay?
She goes into the ring under the Colonel's eagle eye, and she wins her division.
The thing that I liked is the way that he was jumping really clean when he was trying. And like over the spread going uphill, still you came forward at it really good. But he could have really, if he was a little clumsy, he could have had that second rail very easily, but he didn't. He was good.
Yeah, wow.
Stuart Young-Black is also the first Canadian in history to win the big one, the Kentucky Rolex. He remembers the Colonel's military discipline.
Oh, he was pretty tough on everybody. And that was why he was good at what he was doing. So we were quite, Colonel then was...
Well, the Zagani were still friends, you know. We never had any serious arguments.
Which in this sport is pretty tough.
That's amazing.
Paige Lockton is another Gutowski alumna. She was a 1992 Olympic team standby with her big horse, O'Reilly.
I remember my first lesson with the Colonel, and he is really something else. I saw this older gentleman, and at the time I think he was about 76, and I knew he had tons to offer. I was in awe of him, but I didn't expect him to leap up on top of my 7-year-old strong Hanoverian, very headstrong Hanoverian, and have him going beautifully within 30 seconds of sitting on his back and stopping and saying, "Now, why can't you do that? You're a young thing." He really was fantastic. He still is.
The best we'd have to do for payment was bring him a bottle of whiskey at Christmas time. So he never asked anything, and he was always out there bang on time and scolding us if we were 5 minutes late.
I think what shines through the most is his love for the animals. Under any circumstances, if anything went wrong in a lesson, it was never the animal's fault. It was always the rider.
Another student and member of the Barcelona team is Edie Tarvis-Gourley.
He's a wonderful teacher. He's got all that knowledge that stored up in his brain that he's learned from, eons ago, and it's incredible. I mean, he's helped so many riders, with Peter Gray and, scores of people that he's helped. And I just love to see him come out to the competitions. He brings his dog, and it's just great to see him.
Remember, you're here to
and I hope he'll be around for a lot longer.
I want you now to make a circle.
The Colonel is still handing his knowledge down to succeeding generations.
Let your body get rotating slightly. Okay, that's it. Feeling in here, and not just loose completely. You have to have a feeling in. You see this? You exercise ankle, knee, and the hip.
On weekends, he can usually be found at a horse show, serving as judge. He's there from morning till night, whether it's junior classes or an Olympic trial.
Well, I'm glad you didn't crucify me. I'll see you, Colonel. Bye-bye.
On cool mornings in the autumn, he still rides to hounds with the Caledon Hunt.
Sorry, dear, I didn't hear you.
Ellison wanted to see that.
Well, are we being followed?
Marie with Kathleen.
Thank you, warm you up.
Thank you. On a nice cold morning like this, this is just great. Thank you.
Yes. Maybe I will feel warmer later.
Nice.
Good morning.
Hi.
Can you get in up there?
Thank you.
I am hunting with Eglinton 43 years. And I never was on so-called killed. I mean, I don't remember when once when the fox was actually caught and killed.
Michael Elder invites the Gutowskis to the 150th anniversary breakfast of the Toronto North York Hunt. As much as any comrades in arms, these horse people are family.
Hi, Carol. Hi, Marianne.
There's Tommy Cork, another past Olympic team student.
Both elders.
Those were the good old days.
He was a very good rider.
You're still going on now, though.
Very good rider.
And we had to stop.
And life comes full circle as he meets Baron Hasso von Diergaardt of the German cavalry.
Your cavalry, they were attacking, and you were still riding with lances. Remember that. And you were attacking our tanks.
That's absolutely nonsense. Absolutely nonsense. Forgive me, but it's absolute nonsense. It was happened only in one occasion.
Yeah.
It was in the northern part when cavalry regiments got the order to stop the progress of the German infantry.
Yeah.
And they, 2 squadrons charged. And when they charged through the infantry, which was spread in every directions, behind this were not tanks, but armored cars. And armored cars.
Armored cars,
Armored cars. And maybe even some tanks. And that was only time when the charge went through the infantry and get on the tanks. But that was not in Polish way of fighting to fight the tanks with the lances.
No.
Sorry.
But
Mrs. von Diergaardt and Sophie remember the Berlin Olympics, while their husbands remember the war.
War is an awful thing. But
you can say that again.
But I tell you frankly, I still believe that you can go through the war and have a clean conscience when you did nothing which was against any, let's say, humanity or something.
Yeah.
And I have that feeling. Yeah. And I was in Poland to the last day, because till October I was still fighting. And then I was on the Western Front. Yeah. And I could not find the slightest thing I should be ashamed of, or hurting the civilian, or prisoner of war or something.
That's what my father told me when he gave me his saber from the First World War. And he told me, he said, wear it with honor. I know you have to do your duty, but he said, if you take prisoners, treat everybody the way you wish to be treated. You know?
Yes.
So.
It was very good. Very nice show.
I must say that I'm still standing here. It's only because of my horses.
Many times when I was lying down under the tank in Normandy, many times in Canada, I wake up in the middle of the night and I was thinking about, was it worse? Was that these young lives which were given in '39 were for some good cause? Was this worse or not? And I must tell you frankly, that until today, I had some doubts. Because we were fighting for Poland to be Poland.
Well, you know, for me, it's a stupid thing. But I'm trying to prove that being 80 years old, you still can ride a horse, you know. That may be stupid. But at the same time, it's a stupid pleasure. It's a pleasure when you are in age when you should retire already 20 years. And you still can act like you will be 40, 50 years younger. That is a great satisfaction. And on a horseback particularly.